Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with immigration attorney Brian D. Lerner. I'd like to talk in this particular video about the, the main differences between the E-2 and the L-1. Clearly, this video is made for those entrepreneurs, those people who have their own businesses. And I get so many emails and questions, and they say, look, I come from a country that has an E2. I already have my own business in whatever country they happen to be in. Should I come to the U.S. on an E2 or an L1? I mean, that's the bottom line. So, I'm going to go through some of the advantages and disadvantages of both, and also let you know that sometimes there is no absolute right answer, and sometimes, depending on the facts of the case, one is better than the other, but for another person, the other is better than that one. So, given that, let's just get to some basics. Now, first of all, with an E2, you have to be in a country that has a treaty with the United States in order to do the E2. Bottom line, if you're not in that country, if you're not a citizen of that country, then E2 is out of the question, and that forces the issue. That means for sure you're going to do an L1. So the idea here is that if you are in a country that has a treaty, that's when the decision making time comes. Now, let's assume that you are in a country that has a treaty with the US that allows an E2. Next issue is, do you have your own business, okay, in your home country? Let's say you're in Canada or Taiwan or Germany or wherever you happen to be. Does it have, or do you have your own business? Well, if the answer is no, then an L1 is out of the question and an E2 has to go forward, because the L1 does require you to have your own business. So in this particular regard, those are some clear-cut issues as to which one to take. Now, another issue that usually comes up fairly quickly that determines which one is, how much money do you have to invest? If, let's say, I say, okay, L1, E2, you have your own business, you come from a country that has a treaty with the United States, and let's say you say to me, well, I have $25,000 that I want to invest in my own business, and I can't decide between the E2 or the L1. Well, I can tell you right off the bat, is not the E2. For the E2, realistically, you need to have about 75,000 to 100,000 US. While it is possible to have less than that and still get an E2, it gets exponentially more difficult. So the reality is, especially if you've got a choice between an E2 or an L1, if you've got less than 75,000 or 100,000, go with the L1. Okay. There's so those are some of the issues that kick one out over the other. And another is, I have a lot of times people say, look, I have my own business, and when I come to the US, I'm going to open up my computer in my living room, and I'm going to have lots of business that goes through the internet. I don't need to have a real office. I'm going to do this or that. It doesn't even require hardly any real investment. Well, given that, you have foreclosed the possibility of an E2, because with an E2, you have to have a real investment. So if you have like a consulting type firm, or you have stuff that comes out of your head, or you have something that doesn't require actual investment, then the E2 won't work. Unfortunately, a lot of people mistake the investment as transferring 100,000 from some bank in their foreign country to transferring 100,000 to the newly created business line bank in the US, and they say, okay, I've invested 100,000, and that's not the case. If you can take your money out wherever it is, whenever you want, then it's not an investment. It's just a transfer of money. In order for there to be investment, there has to be some risk, and the risk has to show that the money was actually given for the purpose of the investment. Now, so that's something to consider as well. Now, with L1 or E2, you have to have a real office. You cannot work out of your garage. You cannot work on a computer out of your home. It needs to be a real office with a real address, and I understand the reality that sometimes immigration has not caught up to how people do business, but that's how it is. If you want to get the visa, you need a real office. Now, it doesn't have to be a huge office. In fact, you can get one of those Fijian suites where you rent a little dinky office for a few $100 a month, and it's got the joint conference room, the joint library, kitchen, hallways, waiting room. Everything else is shared between all the tenants, but you only have your own little office. So if that's the case, then given that, you need to look for a Fijian suite somewhere in order to do it. Now, in order in order to understand the issues further, with an L1, it can be much more of a business that's much more type consulting, or one that doesn't require a lot of investment. I've done a lot of L1s where the investment was only between $10,000 and $20,000, and half of that is just capitalization into the company bank account. So, as far as just pure money goes, for investment, the L1's the better way to go. Now, just so you know, with the E-2, we don't need prior USCIS approval. We can actually send the whole packet directly to the U.S. consulate, and they will, have their own team. They make their own decisions, and frankly, um, they're they're very qualified, and they're specific to E-2 petitions, these particular teams. So a lot of times where you'd send exactly the same thing, for example, a change of status at USCIS for and you'd get like 3 pages of what's called a request for evidence because they didn't understand this or that. A lot of times that doesn't even come close to happening at the U.S. consulates. So that's one thing. Now, with the L1, you do have to have prior USCIS approval, but you can do premium processing, which takes a lot less time. And then once, hopefully, it's approved, they will forward the approval to whatever consulate you decide that you want to go to. Now, there is always the question of, how do I later get the green card? Well, one of the best ways to get a green card, especially through employment based, is what's called the EB1C, or multinational manager petition. Now, I've got lots of videos on this, and I'm only bringing it up because what that means is exactly what it says, that there are two companies in two different countries that you manage both of them. That is a multinational manager petition. So the L1 flows right into that. It doesn't mean you can't do an E-2 as well if you qualify, but you should keep the company open if you have it in the foreign land, so that a year, year and a half, 2 years, whatever down the line, you can apply for the EB1C for the green card, and that takes so much less investment than other forms of employment-based visas. Okay, so I know I've jumped from thing to thing to thing here, but I just wanted to go over some advantages and disadvantages on E2 versus L1, what you might think about as to which way you might go. And if you like the video, click thumbs up, hello, and send me your questions. I do give a free, the initial free immigration consultation. Okay, more on the coming videos.